Imagine holding like a $500,000 budget in your hands.
Just casually holding $500,000.
Right, yeah. And your job is to bet every single penny of it on what people in your city will want to wear in exactly 9 months.
Which is terrifying if you think about it.
No, absolutely, because if you get it right, you move the inventory, you keep the lights on, and you get to do it all over again next season.
Yeah, but if you're wrong,
Exactly. If you are wrong, if, a micro trend shifts or the local economy dips or, I don't know, the fabric just doesn't drape the way people want, your business is saddled with racks of dead weight.
and you might go bankrupt.
Literally bankrupt. Welcome to the high-stakes, ruthless financial engineering of fashion buying. I am so glad you're joining us for this deep dive today.
We have a really fascinating one today.
We do. We are looking at a document you sent over called Curating a Boutique. And the mission here is to strip away the glamour and really look at the brutal math behind what ends up on the rack.
It really is a brutal science. I think the public perception of a fashion buyer is, someone sitting front row at a runaway show in Paris.
Sipping espresso.
Right, sipping espresso, pointing at a coat and saying, oh, I'll take 100 of those.
Living the dream.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the reality, detailed in our source material, paints a very, very different picture.
Yeah.
Behind every successful boutique, whether it's a physical storefront or a digital marketplace, there is a buyer who acts as this, high-level risk assessor.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand how those garments get onto the floor, we have to talk about the cognitive dissonance required to actually do this job.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. Like, the source material talks about the buyer having a dual role. It's almost like being a museum curator, but you also have to be a commodities trader.
Yes. They are the ultimate friction point.
And I want to dig into that friction. Because unlike a museum, a boutique has to sell its art to keep the lights on. How do they balance that artistic storytelling with the need to make a profit? You can have the most beautiful, cohesive collection in the world, but if the margin architecture doesn't make sense...
The boutique folds. Yeah, that tension is basically the defining characteristic of the job. What's fascinating here is that every boutique tells a story to differentiate itself.
Right.
You have the creative side, the brand aesthetics, the seasonal narratives, visual merchandising. But all of that is immediately checked by something called an open-to-buy budget.
The OTB.
Yes, the OTB. This is the financial lifeline of the buyer. It's this complex formula that tells the buyer exactly how much capital they have available to purchase inventory for a specific period.
Wait, let me stop you there, because the concept of the open-to-buy budget is where the whole shopping spree illusion totally shatters for me.
Oh, it really does.
Because the OTB isn't just a static credit limit, right? It's dynamic. So if I'm a buyer... and last month's cashmere sweaters didn't sell as fast as I projected, my OTB for next month actually shrinks in real time.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It shrinks because your capital is physically sitting on a hanger.
Wow.
Right. And what's fascinating here is how that OTB forces the buyer to make ruthless compromises. Let's say a buyer sees this brilliant new avant-garde designer.
Right. They fall in love with the pieces.
Exactly. They love the artistic storytelling.
Yeah.
But the wholesale price is high, and the garments serve a very niche lifestyle. The buyer has to look at their OTB and ask, well, can I afford to tie up 15% of my seasonal budget in pieces that might take 4 months to sell?
Right. Or do I need to allocate that capital toward, high volume, lower margin basics that will turn over in 3 weeks?
Yes, to generate immediate cash flow.
It's portfolio management. They are building a diversified stock portfolio, but instead of equities and bonds, it's, silk blouses and denim.
That is exactly what it is.
Which means the story boutique tells isn't just an artistic choice. It is a carefully calculated assortment designed to manipulate, for lack of a better word, how a customer spends money.
I mean, manipulate is a strong word, but it's accurate.
They need the flashy, high-risk items to get you in the door, but they need the safe, boring basics to actually pay the rent.
And that leads directly into how a buyer builds an assortment plan. A curated assortment is highly engineered. The source material emphasizes that a buyer isn't just picking items they personally like.
Right. It's not their personal closet.
No, not at all. They are decoding the target customer on a granular psychographic level.
Like really deep profiling.
Exactly. I mean, we all know buyers look at age groups, income brackets, basic demographics. But a high-level buyer is analyzing fashion preferences, shopping habits, margin tolerances, and lifetime customer value.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the source touches on regional influences. And it's not just the obvious stuff.
Like, don't buy heavy winter coats for a store in Miami.
Right, exactly. A buyer in Miami and a buyer in Seattle might look at the exact same designer collection but curate totally different items based on local lifestyles. But it's also about understanding the specific economic behaviors of a local market.
Yes, the microeconomics of a zip code.
Yeah. A buyer has to know that a customer in one neighborhood might willingly pay a 60% markup on a recognized anchor brand, but they would completely balk at paying a 30% markup on an unknown emerging label.
That is the exact mechanism. Buyers use what are called anchor brands.
Which are what, exactly?
They're well-known labels with high demand, but they often have lower profit margins for the boutique. They stock these simply to guarantee foot traffic.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the real skill is in the adjacency. They will place a high-margin, private label item or an emerging brand right next to the anchor brand.
Oh, well.
The buyer is betting that once the customer is in the fitting room with the anchor brand, they will add the higher margin piece to their purchase. The entire physical layout of the curation is a psychological map based on projected spending behavior.
So an assortment plan isn't just a list of clothes, it's a trap.
A very aesthetically pleasing trap.
Right, in the most professional, well-dressed sense of the word. But to set that trap effectively, the buyer has to predict what the customer is going to want months before the customer even knows they want it.
Which brings us to trend forecasting.
Yeah, the outline refers to trend forecasting, but the way it's often described, like someone consulting a crystal ball or just having a good eye, that feels completely inadequate for the amount of money on the line.
Oh, it absolutely is.
I imagine it's not just someone scrolling social media and deciding green is going to be big next spring.
Not anymore, no.
Yeah.
The era of relying purely on a buyer's intuition is largely over. The margin for error is just too thin.
Right.
Today, trend forecasting is a rigorous, algorithmic process. The document outlines how buyers monitor industry reports, fashion weeks influencers, consumer feedback. But the real mechanism behind that is data velocity.
Data velocity, what does that look like in practice?
Well, software algorithms can scrape platforms like TikTok or Instagram and track the exact velocity of specific hex codes.
Wait, like specific shades of a color?
Yes, or the adoption rate of a particular silhouette.
So they are watching the adoption curve in real time.
Precisely.
So if a trend is already saturating the mainstream feed, a buyer for an exclusive boutique knows they've actually missed the window because their specific customer wants to be ahead of that curve.
Exactly. They're tracking early signals to secure inventory before the demand peaks. Successful collections are a calculated mix of these trend-driven items and timeless wardrobe staples.
Evaluated on quality, market demand, all that.
Right. But even with incredible data, managing that inventory is the highest wire act of the entire job. It is essentially a game of high-stakes Tetris where the blocks are capital, physical shelf space, and time.
I want to focus on that time element because
Yeah.
the source material brings up the massive financial risks. Overstocking, understocking, and excess markdowns. And I think markdowns are something people really misunderstand.
Oh, definitely.
Like, as a shopper, I love a 50% off sale. But for a buyer, a markdown isn't just a fun promotion. It's a failure of the original equation, right?
It is a structural failure, yes. Buyers work with something called a markdown cadence.
Okay.
When they buy 100 units of a dress, the financial model already expects that they won't sell all 100 at full price.
Right. That would be unrealistic.
Exactly. The math might dictate that they need to sell 60 units at full retail, 20 units at a 20% discount, and the last 20 at clearance just to hit their target profit margin for that specific style.
But if the trend dies mid-season or the data was slightly off, that cadence breaks.
It shatters.
You suddenly have to mark down 80 units just to clear the floor space. And clearing the floor space is critical because, as we established with the OTB budget, dead inventory is dead capital.
Exactly. You can't buy the next season's hits if your money is trapped in last season's failures.
If they are predicting the future, aren't they bound to make massive, expensive mistakes?
Well, this is where modern technology and data analytics step in to save the day as margin protectors.
Okay, how so?
Buyers utilize sophisticated software to constantly monitor inventory turnover rates. That's the metric of how many times a store sells and replaces its entire stock over a year.
Oh, okay.
The technology alerts them the moment a product's sell-through rate drops below the optimal cadence. This allows them to make micro adjustments to pricing or visual merchandising way before a massive markdown is required.
But let me push back on this heavy reliance on data, because